we have more comfort than a medieval king. We have instant food, climate control, and entertainment beamed into our pockets. So why are we so stressed? Why do 77% of people report that stress affects their physical health? Our nervous systems are fried. We are overwhelmed by choice, by information, by the pressure to always be productive. We live in a world designed for convenience, but it often feels like it was designed for anxiety. What if some of the answers weren't in a new app or a productivity hack? What if they were buried in the past? The Middle Ages, that 1,000-year stretch from about 500 to 1500 AD, gets a bad rap. We call it the Dark Ages. We think of plagues and mud and misery. And sure, a lot of it was brutal. Life was short, but people endured. They built cathedrals that took 200 years to finish. They created communities that held together through famine and war. They lived lives deeply connected to things we've lost. The soil, the seasons, the silence. Their world was slower, quieter, and in some ways, more grounded. Could their wisdom, forged in hardship, help us now? Could their way of life offer an antidote to our modern burnout? It's not about wanting to live in a drafty castle. It's about finding the durable human truths they understood and seeing if they still work. Let's look at some of the forgotten knowledge from that time, not as a history lesson, but as a practical guide to finding a little more peace in a world that won't stop shouting. Number 25, what if your life was supposed to have ups and downs? People in the Middle Ages had a powerful image for the chaos of life. They called it the Roda Fortunae, or the Wheel of Fortune. You've probably seen drawings of it. A big wheel turned by the blind goddess Fortuna. At the top sits a king in all his glory. On one side, a person is climbing up. On the other, someone is falling off. And at the bottom, a person lies crushed beneath the wheel. This wasn't just a fun drawing, it was a core philosophy. The Roman philosopher Boethius wrote about it in his book The Consolation of Philosophy around 524 AD while he was in prison awaiting execution. His book became a medieval bestseller. The message was simple: the wheel is always turning. No one stays at the top forever, and no one stays at the bottom forever. We don't think like this anymore. We think life is a ladder. We are supposed to climb up and up, more success, more money, a better job, a bigger house. When we have a setback, a job loss, a breakup, a failure, we feel like we've done something wrong. We feel like we've fallen off the ladder and failed the whole game. This pressure to constantly ascend is a huge source of modern stress. We are terrified of the downward turn. The medieval wisdom of the Wheel of Fortune offers a different way to see it. It tells you that ups and downs are not a sign of your personal failure. They are a fundamental, unavoidable part of being alive. The king at the top of the wheel isn't better or smarter. He's just at the top right now, because he will fall. The person at the bottom isn't a loser. They are just at the bottom right now. The wheel will turn, and they will rise again. This thinking cultivates a kind of psychological resilience. It's a form of radical acceptance. You can't control the wheel. You can only control your response to it. This idea is mirrored in modern psychology. The concept of the hedonic treadmill, proposed by psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald T. Campbell in the 1970s, shows that we adapt to good and bad events, always returning to a relatively stable level of happiness. Winning the lottery gives you a temporary boost. A major injury causes a temporary dip. But over time, we tend to return to our baseline. The wheel turns. Believing in the ladder of progress is a recipe for anxiety because you live in constant fear of falling. Believing in the wheel allows you to find peace wherever you are, knowing that your position is temporary. It encourages humility when you're on top and hope when you're at the bottom. It de-stresses you by removing the false pressure that you must always be climbing. So what do we still not know? If the Wheel of Fortune is a more accurate model for a human life than a ladder of progress, why is our entire society, from our economy to our education system, built on the myth of constant upward growth? Is our deep-seated anxiety a direct result of living in a system that denies this fundamental truth? And what would happen if we started teaching our children about the wheel instead of the ladder? Number 24, what if your hands knew how to calm your mind? In our world, work is often abstract. We sit at computers, we move information around. We have meetings, we send emails. It's hard to see a finished product. It's hard to feel a sense of completion. For most people in the Middle Ages, work was physical. A blacksmith hammered iron. A weaver worked a loom. A carpenter shaped wood. A farmer tilled a field. They used their hands to transform raw materials into something useful or beautiful. This wasn't a hobby, it was survival. But there is a deep wisdom in this. The act of working with your hands engages the mind in a unique way. It creates a state of focus that can be deeply meditative. Modern psychology has a name for this. It's called flow, a concept popularized by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow is the state of being so completely absorbed in an activity that you lose track of time. Your sense of self fades away. You are fully present in the moment. Csikszentmihalyi's research in the 1980s and 90s found that people report their highest levels of happiness and satisfaction when they are in this state. And activities involving skilled use of the hands, like surgery, rock climbing, or playing a musical instrument, are among the most reliable ways to achieve flow. The medieval craftsman, hunched over a piece of leather or stone, was a master of flow. They weren't trying to de-stress, they were just doing their job, but the very nature of their work provided a built-in antidote to the anxieties of life. The rhythmic, repetitive motions of sanding wood, kneading dough, or spinning wool can be incredibly calming to the nervous system. This is what some therapists now call behavioral activation. When you're anxious or depressed, your mind is often spinning with negative thoughts. Trying to think your way out of it can be impossible, but doing something physical, something with your hands, forces your brain to focus on the task at hand. It gets you out of your head and into your body. We've lost this connection. We buy things instead of making them. We consume instead of creating. To de-stress, we might watch a show or scroll through social media, which are often passive and don't engage us in a meaningful way. The medieval wisdom here is simple. Use your hands. You don't have to become a blacksmith, but you can cook a meal from scratch. You can learn to knit. You can take up gardening or pottery or woodworking. You can fix a broken chair. The point is to engage in a physical task that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. The feeling of turning a pile of ingredients into a loaf of bread is a powerful cure for the feeling of abstract, endless digital work. It's a tangible accomplishment you can hold in your hands. But here are the questions we still can't answer. Why does the simple act of creating something tangible have such a profound effect on our mental well-being? Is there an evolutionary reason why our brains are wired to find satisfaction in manual skill? And what are the long-term consequences of a society that has almost completely outsourced this need? If flow states are a peak human experience, why have we designed a work culture that seems to actively prevent them? Number 23, could walking without a goal change your brain? For us, walking is usually for one of two things: exercise or transportation. We walk on a treadmill to burn calories, or we walk from the car to the office. It has a purpose, it's efficient. In the Middle Ages, walking was just life. It was the primary way to get anywhere, but it was also something more. The pilgrimage was a central part of medieval life. People would walk hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to visit a holy site, like Santiago de Compostela in Spain or Canterbury in England. But Geoffrey Chaucer's famous book, The Canterbury Tales, written in the late 14th century, is about a group of such pilgrims. This wasn't a race. The goal wasn't just to get there, the journey itself was the point. A pilgrimage was a long, slow, deliberate walk. It was a time for reflection, for prayer, for observation. It was a walking meditation that could last for months. You walked through forests and fields, villages, and towns. You were exposed to the weather, the landscape, the rhythm of the day. Your mind had time to wander, to process, to just be quiet. Our modern lives are a war against this kind of empty time. We fill every spare moment with podcasts, music, or scrolling. We rarely just walk and let our minds be. The idea of a long, aimless walk feels like a waste of time. But a growing body of research suggests this is a profound mistake. A 2014 study from Stanford University found that walking boosts creative inspiration. People who walked, especially outdoors, came up with more creative and high-quality ideas than those who sat. The researchers, Merle Opezzo and Daniel L. Schwartz, called it walking's effect on creativity. It seems that the simple bilateral motion of walking allows the mind to enter a different state, making connections it couldn't make while sitting still and focusing. The medieval pilgrim understood this intuitively. The long journey wasn't just about devotion. It was about transformation. You left as one person and arrived as another. The simple act of putting one foot in front of the other for days and weeks on end stripped away the non-essential. It calmed the anxious mind. Today, we don't need to walk to Canterbury, but we can reclaim the spirit of the pilgrimage. Go for a walk with no destination in mind. Leave your phone at home. Don't listen to anything. Just walk. Pay attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, the sound of the wind, the things you see. Let your mind go where it wants to go. It's not about burning calories. It's about letting your brain breathe. It's an act of quiet rebellion against the cult of productivity. And yet, some things remain a mystery. What exactly is the neurological mechanism that links the physical act of walking to enhance creativity and mental clarity? We know it works, but we don't fully understand why. If our brains evolved to think best while walking, what are the cognitive costs of our overwhelmingly sedentary lives? And could the modern rise in anxiety disorders be linked, in part, to the simple fact that we have forgotten how to just go for a long, slow, pointless walk? Number 22 is silence, a resource we've forgotten how to use. Imagine the soundscape of the medieval world. There were no engines, no background hum of electricity. No traffic, no notifications. The world was quiet. The loudest sounds were natural: the wind, a thunderstorm, a herd of animals. Or they were human: a blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of a marketplace, the singing in a church. But for much of the time, especially at night or in rural areas, there was a profound silence that we can barely comprehend today. Monastic life, a huge part of the medieval world, was built around this silence. For monks in orders like the Benedictines or Cistercians, silence wasn't an absence of noise. It was a presence. It was a tool for contemplation and spiritual connection. The Rule of St. Benedict, written around 530 AD, lays out specific times for silence and speech. It was seen as a discipline, a way to quiet the noise of the ego and listen for something deeper. They understood that a mind constantly bombarded with input cannot find peace. We live in the opposite of that world. A 2011 study by the World Health Organization found that noise pollution is not just an annoyance, it's a serious health risk, contributing to heart disease, sleep disturbances, and stress. Our brains are constantly processing auditory information, even when we're not consciously listening. The constant dings, pings, and chatter of our digital lives put our nervous systems in a state of low-grade, chronic alert. We are overstimulated and exhausted. We seek out noise to distract us from our own thoughts, but this just makes the problem worse. The medieval monk's wisdom is to treat silence as a nutrient, as essential as food or water. We need to intentionally seek it out. This doesn't mean moving to a monastery. It means creating small pockets of silence in your day. It could be 5 minutes in the morning before anyone else is awake, just sitting without any sound. It could be a walk in the park without headphones. It could be turning off the radio in the car. At first, it can be uncomfortable. The silence can feel loud. Your own anxious thoughts rush in to fill the void. But if you stick with it, something changes. Your nervous system starts to calm down. Your brain gets a chance to rest and reset. Florence Nightingale, the famous nurse, wrote in 1859 in her Notes on Nursing, "Unnecessary noise is the most cruel absence of care which can be inflicted on either sick or well." She knew that quiet was essential for healing. The medieval world, by necessity, lived this truth. We, by choice, have abandoned it. Reclaiming silence is one of the simplest and most powerful ways to de-stress. But the questions linger. We know noise is bad for us, but what is it about true silence that is so restorative to the human brain? Is it just the absence of a stressor, or does silence itself trigger a unique neurological healing process? As our world gets louder and louder, will silence become a luxury good, available only to the wealthy who can afford to escape the noise? And what are we losing as a species by forgetting what the world sounds like without us in it? Number 21. What if boredom was a good thing? We are terrified of being bored. The moment we have a free second in the checkout line, at a red light, waiting for a friend crying, we pull out our phones. We fill the space. We see boredom as a failure, a sign that we are not being productive or entertained. Our entire digital economy is designed to eliminate boredom. There is always another video to watch, another post to scroll, another game to play. In the Middle Ages, boredom was an unavoidable part of life. There was no on-demand entertainment. The sun went down, and for many, the day's work was over. The seasons dictated the pace of life. There were long winters with little to do but mend tools and wait. This wasn't seen as a problem to be solved. It was just the rhythm of life. This empty time wasn't really empty. It was the space where creativity, reflection, and imagination could grow. When the mind isn't being fed a constant stream of external stimulation, it starts to create its own. It daydreams, it makes connections, it solves problems in the background. Like, this is not just a romantic notion. modern neuroscience is beginning to understand the importance of what is called the default mode network, DMN. This is a network of brain regions that becomes active when we are not focused on an external task. First described by neurologist Marcus Reichel in 2001, the DMN is associated with things like self-reflection, planning for the future, and creativity. When you are bored and your mind is wandering, your DMN is hard at work. By constantly stimulating ourselves, we are shutting this vital network down. We are robbing ourselves of the very mental state that allows for our most creative and insightful thoughts. The medieval peasant, staring into the fire on a long winter night, was giving their default mode network a masterclass. They were processing the day's events, thinking about the future, and letting their imagination roam. We have traded this rich inner world for a shallow, endless stream of external content. Stress we feel is often a symptom of this. A brain that never gets to rest and wander becomes exhausted and anxious. The wisdom here is to intentionally embrace boredom. Schedule time in your day to do nothing. Put your phone in another room and just sit. Go for a walk and just let your mind drift. Resist the urge to fill every single gap. It will feel strange at first. You might feel restless or anxious. That's a sign of withdrawal. But if you can push through that discomfort, you will find a quieter, more creative space on the other side. You will give your brain the downtime it needs to do its most important work. Boredom isn't the enemy of productivity. It's the soil in which its seeds are planted. And yet, we have so much to learn. Like, what is the precise relationship between the default mode network and mental health conditions like anxiety and depression? Has our chronic avoidance of boredom rewired our brains to be less resilient and more dependent on external validation? If we were to reintroduce periods of genuine stimulus-free boredom into our education system, would we see a rise in creativity and a decline in student stress? Number 20, could you find freedom in fewer choices? We think freedom is about having more choices, 1,000 TV shows to watch, 50 kinds of toothpaste at the store, endless career paths to pursue. We celebrate this, but it's also exhausting. The psychologist Barry Schwartz called this the paradox of choice in his 2004 book of the same name. His research showed that while some choice is good, too much choice leads to anxiety, indecision, and dissatisfaction. We become paralyzed by the options, and even when we do make a choice, we're haunted by the fear that we could have made a better one. This constant low-grade stress of optimization is a hallmark of modern life. Life in the Middle Ages was the opposite. For most people, choices were extremely limited. You were born into a certain class, and you would likely stay there. You would probably do the same work as your parents. You would eat what was grown locally and in season. You would marry someone from your own village. From our perspective, this sounds incredibly restrictive, but there is a hidden freedom in this lack of choice. When your path is largely laid out for you, you are freed from the immense psychic burden of having to invent your life from scratch every single day. The medieval concept of a vocation or a calling is relevant here. The idea was that you had a specific role to play in the divine order of things. The blacksmith had a role, the farmer had a role, the monk had a role. Fulfilling that role well was the source of meaning and satisfaction. It wasn't about choosing the most glamorous or profitable path. It was about doing your given work with skill and dedication. This provided a framework, a structure that held life together. We don't have to go back to a rigid, feudal system to learn from this. The wisdom is about intentionally limiting our choices to reduce decision fatigue. You can apply this in small ways. Create a personal uniform of clothes you like so you don't have to decide what to wear every morning. Eat roughly the same thing for breakfast every day. Choose a few high-quality sources of news and ignore the rest. In bigger ways, it's about committing to a path. Instead of endlessly dabbling in a dozen hobbies, pick one or two and go deep. Instead of constantly wondering if you're in the right career, focus on becoming excellent at the one you're in. Commitment is the antidote to the paradox of choice. By making a decision and sticking with it, you close the door on 1,000 other possibilities, and in doing so, you liberate your mental energy to focus on what's in front of you. The medieval serf had no choice but to commit. We have the choice, and we can use it to choose commitment itself and find a surprising amount of peace in it. But this raises some difficult questions. Where's the line between helpful constraints and oppressive restrictions. Is our modern anxiety about choice a luxury problem, and would we trade it in a heartbeat for the genuine hardships that came with a lack of options? And if we did start to value commitment over choice, how would that change our consumer culture, which is built entirely on the promise of endless new options? Number 19, are you forgetting to look at the stars? Before electric light, the night sky was a spectacle. When the sun went down, the world was plunged into a profound darkness, and the stars, moon, and Milky Way would blaze across the sky in a way we can now only see in the most remote places on Earth. For people in the Middle Ages, the night sky was not just beautiful, it was a clock, a calendar, and a map. The sailors navigated by the stars, farmers planted by the phases of the moon. The movements of the heavens were deeply integrated into the rhythm of life and belief. They were a constant, humbling reminder of a vast order beyond human affairs. We have lost the night sky. According to a 2016 study, 80% of the world's population lives under light-polluted skies. In Europe and the United States, 99% of the public can't experience a natural night. We live under a perpetual orange glow. We have traded the cosmos for the convenience of being able to see in the dark. This has a profound, though often unnoticed, effect on our psyche. We have become disconnected from our place in the universe. Our daily problems, an annoying email, a traffic jam, a social media argument feel enormous because we've lost our sense of scale. The medieval wisdom here is about the power of awe. Awe is the feeling we get when we encounter something vast and overwhelming that we can't easily explain. Psychologists Dr. Keltner and Jonathan Haidt at the University of California, Berkeley have studied awe extensively. Their research suggests that experiencing awe can make us feel more connected to others, more humble, and can even reduce stress and improve physical health. It shrinks our sense of self and its petty concerns, putting our lives into a much larger perspective. The night sky is one of the most reliable triggers of awe available to humanity. Looking at the stars forces you to confront the immense scale of time and space. You are looking at light that has traveled for thousands or even millions of years to reach your eye. It is a direct physical connection to the deep past. It is a visceral reminder that your life, with all its worries and anxieties, is a tiny, fleeting moment in an immense cosmic drama. This is not a depressing thought, it's a liberating one. It takes the pressure off. It relativizes your problems. You can reclaim this ancient practice, find a place away from city lights, even if it's just a local park. Let your eyes adjust to the darkness. Look up. You don't need to know the names of the constellations. Just observe. Notice the sheer number of stars. Look for the faint band of the Milky Way. Contemplate the emptiness and the vastness. It is a powerful form of meditation. It's a way to de-stress by remembering how small your stresses really are. But we are left with profound questions. Has the loss of the night sky contributed to our species' growing narcissism and eco-anxiety by removing the most obvious daily reminder that we are not the center of the universe? What are the subtle long-term psychological and physiological effects of never experiencing true darkness? If we could somehow restore the night sky to our cities, would it lead to a measurable decrease in crime and an increase in pro-social behavior, as the science of all might predict? Number 18. What if you accepted death instead of fearing it? The Middle Ages was a world where death was a constant, visible presence. Life was short and precarious. Disease, famine, and violence were common. Infant mortality was incredibly high. People died at home, surrounded by their families. Death was not hidden away in hospitals and sanitized. This constant proximity to mortality gave rise to a powerful cultural tradition, the memento mori, which is Latin for remember you must die. This wasn't meant to be morbid or depressing. It was a call to live a better, more meaningful life. Skulls and skeletons were common motifs in art. People were encouraged to regularly contemplate their own death. In our modern world, we do everything we can to deny death. We hide it away. We use euphemisms. We are obsessed with youth and anti-aging. The thought of our own mortality is a source of deep anxiety, something to be pushed to the back of our minds. But according to many philosophical traditions and a growing body of psychological research, this denial is actually the source of the problem. It's the fear of death that causes us to live anxiously. The wisdom of memento mori is that by consciously and regularly contemplating the fact of your death, you can rob it of its power to terrify you. The practice serves two purposes. First, it clarifies your priorities. When you remember that your time is finite, The small, trivial things that cause you so much stress start to fall away. The petty argument, the social slight, the obsession with status, they all seem ridiculous in the face of oblivion. It forces you to ask what really matters. Am I living a life that is true to my values? Steve Jobs, in his famous 2005 Stanford commencement address, said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Second, it can increase your appreciation for the present moment. The Stoic philosophers, who heavily influenced medieval Christian thought, advocated for this. When you are acutely aware that this day, this hour, this breath could be your last, you experience it with more richness and gratitude. You stop taking life for granted. This is the core idea behind terror management theory, a concept developed by social psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pischinski. The theory posits that much of human behavior is driven by an unconscious fear of death. By making that fear conscious and confronting it, we can live more authentic and less defensive lives. You can practice memento mori today. You don't need a skull on your desk. You can simply take a few moments each day to reflect on the fact that you will not live forever. You can ask yourself, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be happy with how I live today? This isn't about being gloomy. It's about using the reality of death to wake you up to the reality of your life. It is the ultimate antidote to procrastination and triviality, but the ultimate questions remain. If a conscious awareness of death leads to a better life, why have we evolved such a powerful psychological instinct to deny it? What is the neurological difference between a healthy contemplation of mortality and a debilitating obsessive fear of it? And if our consumer culture is largely fueled by our attempts to distract ourselves from our finitude, could the practice of memento mori, if adopted widely, cause our economic system to collapse? Number 17, could a garden be better than a pharmacy? In the Middle Ages, there was no CVS on the corner. If you got sick, you relied on remedies that came from the earth. Every monastery had a physic garden, and many households cultivated their own medicinal herbs. Knowledge of herbalism was widespread. People knew that chamomile could aid sleep, that mint could soothe an upset stomach, or that willow bark, which contained salicin, the precursor to aspirin, could relieve pain. This wasn't magic, it was practical, accumulated knowledge. The 12th century German abbess Hildegard of Bingen was a renowned writer, composer, and mystic, but she was also a brilliant naturalist who wrote extensively about the healing properties of plants in her book Physica. We have largely outsourced this knowledge to the pharmaceutical industry. We trust a pill in a bottle more than a plant in the ground. While modern medicine is a miracle, our disconnect from the natural sources of healing has left us poorer. We see nature as a backdrop, not as an active participant in our well-being. The stress we feel is often exacerbated by this sense of separation from the natural world. The medieval wisdom is not to abandon modern medicine, but to rediscover our connection to the healing power of plants. This can take many forms. The simple act of gardening itself is a well-documented stress reducer. The physical activity, the contact with soil, and the focus on nurturing life can lower cortisol levels and improve mood. A 2011 study in the Netherlands found that after a stressful task, subjects who gardened for 30 minutes experienced a greater drop in cortisol than those who read a book indoors. Beyond gardening, there is the simple act of using herbs in your daily life. Drinking a cup of peppermint or chamomile tea is a small ritual that can have a calming effect. Using essential oils like lavender for aromatherapy has been shown in some studies to reduce anxiety. Learning to identify and use a few simple, safe, local plants can be incredibly empowering. It reestablishes a link to the world our ancestors inhabited. It reminds us that we are not separate from nature, but a part of it, and that the world around us contains things that can help us heal. This approach aligns with the modern concept of biophilia, the idea proposed by biologist E.O. Wilson that humans have an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. Our high-tech, indoor lives are starving this instinct, and that contributes to our unease. Tending a small herb garden on a windowsill or learning to make a simple herbal salve is a way to feed that instinct. It's a grounded, tangible practice in a world that is becoming increasingly virtual and abstract. And yet, there are still so many unknowns. We know many medicinal plants work, but for thousands of traditional remedies, we still haven't isolated the active compounds or understood their precise mechanisms of action. How much of the healing effect of herbalism comes from the chemical properties of the plants, and how much comes from the placebo effect and the ritual of preparing them? As we lose biodiversity at an alarming rate, how many potential life-saving medicines are we destroying before we even have a chance to discover them? Number 16, what if your community was your safety net? In our modern world, the individual is supreme. We prize self-reliance, independence, and personal achievement. But this can lead to a profound sense of isolation. Rates of loneliness are skyrocketing, and research has consistently shown that loneliness is as damaging to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We have more ways to connect than ever before, but we often feel more alone. We are stressed because we feel like we have to face all of life's challenges by ourselves. The medieval world was fundamentally communal. Your identity was not just your own. It was tied to your family, your village, your parish, and your guild. Individualism, as we know it, didn't really exist. Survival depended on cooperation. If a barn needed to be raised, the whole village helped. If a family's crops failed, the community would support them. The guild system, which flourished in the High Middle Ages, was a perfect example of this. A guild was an association of artisans or merchants who oversaw the practice of their craft in a particular town. They set standards, trained apprentices, and provided a social safety net for their members. If a guild member fell ill or died, the guild would support their family. This deep sense of belonging provided a powerful buffer against the stresses of a harsh and uncertain world. You knew you were part of something larger than yourself. You had a place. You were not alone. The church also played a central role, providing a shared set of beliefs, rituals, and a community that transcended family or profession. The wisdom here is not about giving up our individuality. It's about recognizing that we are social creatures who are hardwired for connection. We need a tribe. The work of sociologists like Robert Putnam, whose 2000 book Bowling Alone documented the decline of social capital in America, shows the cost of our fading community ties. To de-stress, we need to actively rebuild these bonds. This means moving beyond superficial online interactions and investing in real-world relationships. It means joining a club, a sports team, or a volunteer organization. It means getting to know your neighbors. It means creating and participating in rituals with your friends and family. It means showing up for people when they need help and having the courage to ask for help when you need it. A strong community is a form of collective mental health. When you share your burdens, they become lighter. When you know that there are people who have your back, the inevitable setbacks of life feel less catastrophic. The medieval guild is gone, but the human need for a group of people bound by mutual interest and support is stronger than ever. But this raises some fundamental questions. Is it possible to recreate the deep obligatory bonds of a medieval village in our modern transient and individualistic society, or are we just creating shallow imitations? What is the neurological impact of chronic loneliness, and how does it physically change the brain over time? As more of our social interactions move into virtual spaces controlled by corporations, what happens to our innate human capacity for genuine, unmediated community? Number 15, could living by the sun fix your sleep? We live in a 24/7 world. We work late, we socialize late, we stay up watching screens that blast our faces with blue light. Then we wake up to an alarm clock in a dark room, chug coffee, and start all over again. Our bodies have no idea what time it is. This disconnect from the natural cycles of light and dark is a major source of physical and mental stress. It disrupts our sleep, our hormones, and our mood. In the Middle Ages, life was governed by the sun. For the vast majority of people who were farmers, the workday began at sunrise and ended at sunset. There was no cheap, effective, artificial lighting. When it got dark, people went to bed. Their lives were deeply entrained to the natural rhythm of the day, which we now call the circadian rhythm. This is the 25-hour biological clock that governs our sleep-wake cycle, hormone release, and other bodily functions. Modern science has confirmed the profound importance of this rhythm. In 2017, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to 3 scientists, Jeffrey C. Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael W. Young, for their discoveries of the molecular mechanisms controlling the circadian rhythm. We now know that disrupting this rhythm, as we do with our modern lifestyles, is linked to a host of problems, including sleep disorders, depression, obesity, and even some types of cancer. Our constant exposure to artificial light at night, especially the blue light from screens, tricks our brains into thinking it's still daytime. This suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that helps us sleep. The medieval peasant's wisdom was simple because it was unavoidable alive by the light. We can apply this today to dramatically reduce stress and improve our well-being. The key is to get bright light exposure in the morning and avoid it at night. Try to get outside for at least 10 to 15 minutes within the first hour of waking. The morning sunlight helps to reset your circadian clock and signals to your body that it's time to be awake and alert. This, in turn, sets you up for better sleep later. In the evening, do the opposite. Dim the lights in your home. Avoid using phones, tablets, or computers in the hour or two before bed. If you must use a screen, use a blue light blocking filter or glasses. Make your bedroom as dark as possible. By mimicking the natural light-dark cycle of our ancestors, you can help your body return to its natural rhythm. You will sleep more deeply, wake up more easily, and have more stable energy and mood throughout the day. It's a simple, free, and incredibly powerful way to de-stress. And yet, we are still uncovering the complexities. We know the circadian rhythm is controlled by a master clock in the brain, but we are just beginning to understand how nearly every cell in the body has its own peripheral clock. How does the desynchronization of these countless clocks contribute to chronic disease? What are the long-term evolutionary consequences for a species that has so radically divorced itself from the primary environmental cue that shaped its biology for millennia? And could personalized light therapy schedules become a standard prescription for treating mental health conditions in the future? Number 14, what if a feast meant more than just food? Our relationship with food is often a stressful one. We eat on the run, alone, in front of a screen. We are bombarded with conflicting nutritional advice. We feel guilt and anxiety about what we eat. Food has become fuel, a problem to be managed rather than a joy to be celebrated. In the Middle Ages, food was at the center of community life. Because food was often scarce, the act of sharing a meal, especially a feast, was a powerful social event. Holy days, weddings, and harvests were all marked by communal feasting. These weren't just about eating. They were about reinforcing social bonds, celebrating abundance, and sharing a common experience. The feast was a ritual that brought people together. Think of the great halls of castles or monasteries with long trestle tables where everyone from the lord to the lowest servant ate together. But the medieval relationship with food wasn't just about feasting, it was also about fasting. The Christian calendar was filled with fast days. Fridays, the season of Lent, where people were expected to abstain from meat and other rich foods. This created a rhythm to the year, a cycle of abundance and restraint. Fasting made the eventual feast more meaningful and appreciated. This regular, predictable cycle is something we've lost. For many of us, every day is a feast day. We have access to every kind of food all the time. This can lead to overconsumption and a jaded palate. The wisdom here is twofold. First, it's about rediscovering the communal and ritualistic aspect of eating. Make an effort to share meals with others with no screens allowed. Turn dinner into a time for conversation and connection. This simple act can be a powerful antidote to loneliness and stress. Research from the University of Oxford, led by Professor Robin Dunbar, has shown that the more often people eat with others, the more likely they are to feel happy and satisfied with their lives. Second, it's about reintroducing the rhythm of feasting and fasting. This doesn't have to be for religious reasons. The modern practice of intermittent fasting, for example, mirrors this ancient pattern. By creating periods where we don't eat, we can reset our relationship with food. It can increase our appreciation for the meals we do eat and has been linked to various health benefits. The point is not to create rigid, stressful rules, but to break the monotony of constant consumption. By making feasting a special occasion again, rather than a daily default, we can find more joy and less stress in our relationship with food. But there are many unanswered questions. How does the act of eating together physically impact our brains and nervous systems? Does it trigger the release of bonding hormones like oxytocin? As we increasingly eat highly processed, individualized meals, what are the long-term social consequences of the decline of the family dinner? And could the principles of cyclical fasting and feasting be a key to solving our modern epidemics of metabolic disease. Number 13, can you find meaning in a task that outlives you? We live in a culture of instant gratification. We want results now. We get frustrated if a website takes more than 3 seconds to load. We move from job to job, project to project, looking for the next quick win. This short-term thinking can be a source of anxiety. We feel a constant pressure to produce, to show results, to prove our worth immediately. We rarely invest in things that won't pay off for a very long time. Think about the people who built the great medieval cathedrals, like Notre Dame in Paris or Chartres in France. The construction of these magnificent buildings often took centuries. The architect who designed it, the masons who laid the first stones, the carpenters who raised the first timbers, none of them would live to see it finished. They worked their entire lives on a project that they knew was for a future generation. They were part of a chain, a long-term vision that was much bigger than their own individual lives or careers. This is a profound shift in perspective. To find meaning and satisfaction in your work, not because of the immediate reward it brings you, but because of how it contributes to a long-term, multi-generational project. This requires a different kind of motivation. It's not about personal glory or a quick bonus. It's about craftsmanship, a sense of duty, and a faith in the future. It's about planting a tree whose shade you will never sit in. This kind of long-term thinking can be a powerful way to de-stress. It frees you from the tyranny of the immediate. When you see your work as a small contribution to a much larger and longer story, the day-to-day frustrations and setbacks become less significant. You are not just building a wall, you are building a cathedral. This perspective can be applied to any field. A teacher can see their work not just as getting through the curriculum, but as shaping the next generation. A scientist can work on a problem whose solution may not be found for decades. A parent can find meaning in raising a child who will carry their values into the future. The key is to connect your daily tasks to a larger, more enduring purpose. Ask yourself, how does what I'm doing today contribute to a better future, even a future I won't see? This is the opposite of the hustle culture mentality. It's not about burning yourself out for a short-term gain. It's about a slow, steady, sustainable effort in service of a lasting vision. This brings a sense of peace and stability. Your self-worth is no longer tied to the immediate outcome of your work. It's tied to your faithful participation in the process. But this raises some deep questions. In our secular, individualistic age, where can we find the shared multi-generational cathedral projects that can inspire this kind of long-term commitment? Has our obsession with quarterly reports and immediate ROI made it impossible for our institutions to engage in true long-term thinking? And what does it say about our society that the idea of working on something you won't live to see completed now sounds strange rather than noble? And number 12, why did people rely on stories to understand the world? We are drowning in data. We have charts, graphs, statistics, and breaking news alerts. We are constantly fed information, but we often feel more confused and anxious, not less. We have a lot of facts, but we struggle to find meaning. In the Middle Ages, most people were illiterate. Information was not transmitted through written reports or data sets. It was transmitted through stories. The Bible, the lives of the saints, epic poems like Beowulf or the Song of Roland, folktales and local legends. These were the primary ways people made sense of the world. A storyteller, a troubadour, or a priest was a central figure in any community. Stories were how values were taught, how history was remembered, and how people grappled with the great mysteries of life, love, death, betrayal, and courage. Story does something that a list of facts cannot. It organizes information into a meaningful pattern. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has characters we can relate to. It engages our emotions. Our brains are wired for narrative. In fact, research in neuroscience has shown that when we listen to a good story, our brains react as if we are experiencing the events ourselves. A 2010 study at Princeton University led by neuroscientist Yuri Hasson used fMRI scanners to show that the brain activity of a listener begins to mirror the brain activity of the storyteller. This is called neural coupling. Stories literally bring people's minds into sync. This is a powerful tool for reducing stress. When we are anxious, our minds are often chaotic, jumping from one worry to another. A good story can bring order to that chaos. It can take us out of our own heads and immerse us in another world. This is why we get lost in a good book or a movie. It's a form of mental escape that is more restorative than mindlessly scrolling. But the wisdom goes deeper than just entertainment. It's about using stories to make sense of our own lives. We can become the storytellers of our own experience. The practice of journaling is a modern version of this. When you write down the events of your day, you are not just listing facts. You are creating a narrative. You are shaping your experience, finding the patterns, and making meaning out of it. This can be incredibly therapeutic. It helps you to process difficult emotions and gain a sense of control over your own life story. The psychologist James Pennebaker has conducted extensive research showing that expressive writing about traumatic events can lead to significant improvements in both physical and mental health. So, when you feel overwhelmed, turn off the fire hose of raw data, read a novel, watch a film with a compelling plot, or, even better, tell a story. Tell a friend about your day, not as a list of complaints, but as a narrative with challenges and small victories. And write your own story down. The medieval world understood that we are not creatures of information. We are creatures of meaning, and meaning is most often found in a story. But what don't we know? Why did the human brain evolve to be so uniquely receptive to narrative? Is there a storytelling instinct that is as fundamental as our instinct for language? As our communication becomes more fragmented into tweets and headlines, are we weakening our cognitive ability to engage in the kind of deep, sequential thinking that stories require? And could a revival of oral storytelling in our communities be a powerful public health intervention for loneliness and anxiety? Number 11, could you learn to be happy with good enough? Our modern culture is obsessed with optimization. We want the best phone, the best car, the best job, the best vacation. We research endlessly, read reviews, and compare options, all in an effort to make the perfect choice. This mindset, what some call maximizing, is a huge source of stress. Like, we live with a constant nagging feeling that we could be doing better, that there's a more optimal way to live our lives. In the medieval world, the concept of the best was largely irrelevant. You didn't choose your tools, you used the ones you had. You didn't choose from a global supply chain of food, you ate what was available. Life was about sufficiency, not optimization. It was about having good enough to survive and get the job done. This wasn't a choice, it was a necessity, but it fostered a mindset that we have lost. The medieval artisan wasn't trying to create a flawless mass-produced product. They were creating a unique handmade object, and the small imperfections, the wabi-sabi, as the Japanese would call it, were part of its character. They were a sign that it was made by a human hand. This idea is supported by the work of psychologist Herbert Simon, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1978. Simon coined the term satisfying. It's a combination of the words satisfy and suffice. And a satisfier is someone who, when faced with a choice, looks for an option that is simply good enough to meet their criteria. Once they find it, they stop looking. A maximizer, on the other hand, is compelled to examine every single option to ensure they are making the absolute best possible choice. It's research by Barry Schwartz and others has shown that while maximizers may sometimes end up with objectively better outcomes, they are consistently less happy with their choices. They are more prone to regret and self-recrimination. Satisficers, by contrast, are generally happier, more optimistic, and less stressed. The medieval peasant was a natural satisficer. The modern knowledge worker is often a tortured maximizer. The wisdom here is to consciously adopt a good enough philosophy. When you're making a decision, set a few clear, essential criteria. Then choose the first option that meets them. Don't agonize over whether there might be something slightly better out there. This applies to big and small things. Buying a new appliance? Find one with decent reviews in your price range and buy it. Choosing a restaurant? Pick one that looks good enough and go in. This isn't about being lazy or having low standards. It's about recognizing that the marginal benefit of finding the perfect option is often far outweighed by the time, energy, and stress required to find it. By letting go of the need to optimize everything, you free up a huge amount of mental bandwidth. You can accept things as they are, imperfections and all. You can find peace in the good enough. And yet, there are still open questions. What is the neurological basis for the distinction between maximizing and satisficing? Are these traits hardwired, or are they learned behaviors that can be changed with practice? In a competitive global economy, is the good enough mindset a recipe for being left behind? Or is it a sustainable strategy for long-term well-being? And has social media, with its constant display of other people's seemingly perfect lives, turned us all into compulsive maximizers. Number 10 is there a rhythm in your work? Much of our modern work is erratic. Like we are always on responding to emails and messages at all hours. Our days are fragmented, broken up by meetings and notifications. We lurch from one task to another, never finding a steady rhythm. This constant context switching is mentally exhausting and a major cause of burnout. The work of a medieval farmer or craftsman was the opposite. It was deeply rhythmic. The farmer's year was dictated by the slow, predictable rhythm of the season's planting in the spring, tending in the summer, harvesting in the fall, and resting in the winter. The craftsman's day was filled with the repetitive, rhythmic motions of their trade, the steady beat of a hammer, the back and forth of a saw, the whir of a spinning wheel. Even the monk's day was structured by the rhythm of the liturgy of the hours, a cycle of prayers said at specific times from before dawn until after dusk, signaled by the ringing of bells. This rhythm is not just poetic, it's deeply calming to the human nervous system. Rhythmic activities like rocking, swaying, or chanting are found in every culture throughout history as ways to soothe and self-regulate. When we engage in a steady, repetitive motion, it can help to shift our brainwaves from the agitated beta state to the more relaxed alpha state. It's a form of moving meditation. The rhythmic nature of their work provided medieval people with a built-in stress regulation mechanism. We can reintroduce this lost rhythm into our chaotic lives. The key is to find activities that involve steady, repetitive motion. This could be something simple like chopping vegetables for dinner, knitting, or even just going for a walk and paying attention to the rhythm of your own footsteps. The Pomodoro technique, a time management method developed by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s, is a modern way to create rhythm in office work. You work in focused 25-minute blocks, separated by short breaks, creating a predictable pulse to your day. Singing or chanting is another powerful way to tap into this ancient wisdom. The Gregorian chant, which was central to medieval monastic life, is a perfect example. The steady, melodic drone has a powerful effect on both the singer and the listener. Modern science is beginning to understand why. The act of singing, especially long, slow tones, stimulates the vagus nerve, which is a key component of the parasympathetic nervous system, our body's rest and digest system. Stimulating the vagus nerve can lower your heart rate, reduce blood pressure, and switch you out of a state of stress. You don't have to become a monk. Singing along to the radio in your car can have a similar effect. So when you feel scattered and stressed, don't just push harder. Find a rhythm. Put on some music with a steady beat. Do a simple, repetitive task with your hands. Take a few minutes to breathe slowly and rhythmically. The medieval world was built on rhythm, from the seasons to the liturgy to the workshop. We have replaced it with chaos, and our nervous systems are paying the price. But the science is still young. What are the full range of physiological effects of rhythmic activity on the human body? How does it impact hormone levels, neurotransmitter release, and even gene expression? Could rhythmic therapy, using specific beats, movements, or vocalizations, become a targeted treatment for anxiety and PTSD? And in a world increasingly dominated by asynchronous, fragmented digital work, how can we design our jobs and workplaces to be more rhythmic and therefore more human? Number 9, what if you own less? We live in a world of accumulation. We are encouraged from a very young age to want more, to buy more, to own more. Our homes are filled with things we rarely use. Our closets are overflowing. And yet, this accumulation does not seem to be making us happier. In fact, it's often a source of stress. We have to work harder to afford all of our stuff. We have to clean it, organize it, and maintain it. Our possessions, which were meant to serve us, end up owning us. For the vast majority of people in the Middle Ages, this was not a problem. A typical peasant family owned very little, a few pieces of simple furniture, some cooking pots, a couple of changes of clothes, and the tools of their trade. This was a life of material simplicity, born of necessity. There was no clutter. Every object had a purpose and was likely handmade and treasured. They were not constantly tempted by advertisements or social pressure to acquire more. There is a profound freedom in this. When you own very little, you have very little to lose. You are not weighed down physically or mentally by the burden of your possessions. This is the core insight of modern minimalism, a movement that advocates for living with only the things you truly need and love. But this is not a new idea. It has deep roots in many philosophical and religious traditions, including the vows of poverty taken by medieval monks and friars like the Franciscans, who were founded by St. Francis of Assisi in the early 13th century. They chose to renounce possessions as a spiritual practice, believing that it would free them to focus on more important things. We can apply this wisdom without taking a vow of poverty. The process of decluttering, popularized by people like Marie Kondo, can be incredibly therapeutic. Going through your possessions and letting go of the things that no longer serve you can feel like lifting a physical weight. It creates space, not just in your home, but in your mind. It reduces the low-grade stress of living in a cluttered environment. But the practice goes deeper than just a one-time purge. It's about changing your relationship with consumption. It's about questioning the impulse to buy something new. It's about valuing experiences over things. When you stop chasing the next purchase, you free up not only your money, but also your time and mental energy. You can redirect those resources toward things that actually bring you joy and meaning, relationships, hobbies, learning, and community. The medieval peasant lived with less by necessity. We can choose to live with less by design, and in doing so, find a surprising amount of peace and freedom. But what do we still not understand? What is the neurological link between physical clutter and psychological distress? Why does the act of acquiring new things provide such a short-lived hit of pleasure, and why do we become so easily habituated to it? If a significant portion of our economy is based on people buying things they don't need, what would be the economic and social consequences of a widespread shift toward minimalism? Number 8, could dirt and germs be good for you? We are obsessed with cleanliness. We use hand sanitizer, antibacterial soaps, and powerful disinfectants. We live in sterile, climate-controlled environments. We see germs as the enemy, something to be eliminated at all costs. This fear is a modern one. Our understanding of germ theory only dates back to the work of Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch in the 19th century. The medieval world was, by our standards, filthy. People lived in close proximity to their animals. Sanitation was rudimentary. They were constantly exposed to a rich and diverse soup of microbes from the soil, the water, and each other. While this undoubtedly led to the spread of many terrible diseases, there is a growing body of scientific evidence to suggest that our modern sterile world may have gone too far in the other direction, and that this is contributing to our stress and anxiety. This is the basis of the hygiene hypothesis, first proposed by epidemiologist David Strachan in 1989. The hypothesis suggests that a lack of early childhood exposure to microorganisms increases susceptibility to allergic diseases. More recently, this idea has been expanded to include mental health. We now know that our gut is home to trillions of bacteria known as the gut microbiome. This microbiome is in constant communication with our brain via the vagus nerve, a pathway sometimes called the gut-brain axis. A healthy, diverse microbiome is essential for the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin, 90% of which is made in the gut. A growing field of research called psychobiotics is exploring how our gut bacteria influence our mood and behavior. Studies like those conducted by John Cryan and Ted Dinan at University College Cork have shown that a lack of microbial diversity is linked to depression and anxiety. The microbes we are exposed to, especially from soil, seem to play a key role. A specific soil bacterium, Mycobacterium vaccae, has been shown in studies to have antidepressant effects in mice, working in a similar way to Prozac. The medieval peasant, working in the fields with their hands in the dirt, was getting a daily dose of these beneficial microbes. Their immune systems were constantly being trained by this rich exposure. We, in our sanitized world, are starving our microbiomes of this diversity. The wisdom here is not to abandon hygiene. It's to get a little bit dirty. Spend time in nature. Go for a walk in the woods. Do some gardening without gloves. Let your kids make mud pies. Eat a wider variety of plant-based, fiber-rich foods, which feed your good gut bacteria. Avoid unnecessary use of antibiotics and harsh antibacterial products. By reintroducing a bit of the microbial richness of our ancestors' worlds into our own, we may be able to build a more resilient gut, a more balanced immune system, and a calmer mind. It's a radical idea that some of the solution to our modern mental health crisis might be lying right under our feet, in the soil. But the questions are vast. We are only at the very beginning of understanding the gut-brain axis. What are the specific microbial species that are most crucial for mental health, and how do they work? Could we one day have probiotic cocktails tailored to an individual's microbiome to treat anxiety or depression? And what are the long-term, multi-generational consequences of raising children in increasingly sterile environments? Are we accidentally engineering a less resilient human species? Number 7, what did they know about keeping a quiet mind? When we feel stressed or anxious, our minds are often racing with thoughts. We ruminate about the past and worry about the future. We try to fight these thoughts, to push them away, but this often just makes them stronger. We get caught in a spiral of overthinking. In the medieval Christian monastic tradition, there was a deep understanding of this problem. They had a name for these intrusive, unhelpful thoughts. They called them logimoi. The Desert Fathers, a group of Christian hermits living in the Egyptian desert in the 3rd century, developed sophisticated practices for dealing with them. A key figure was the 4th century monk Evagrius Ponticus, who wrote extensively about how to achieve a state of inner stillness, which he called apatheia. This didn't mean apathy or not caring, it meant a state of calm equanimity, free from the disturbance of obsessive thoughts. Their technique was not to fight the thoughts directly, it was to develop a kind of detached watchfulness, to observe the thoughts as they arose, without judging them or getting entangled in them. They would simply notice the thought and let it pass by, like a cloud in the sky. One of their central practices was the repetition of a short, simple prayer or a line of scripture. This is known as a prior rope or cut key in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. The repetition of the phrase served as an anchor for the mind. When a distracting thought came up, they would gently return their focus to the prayer. This is remarkably similar to the practice of mindfulness meditation, which has its roots in Buddhism, but has been popularized in the West by figures like Jon Kabat-Zinn. Modern neuroscience has shown that this kind of practice can actually change the structure and function of the brain. A 2011 study from Harvard, led by neuroscientist Sarah Lazar, found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice can lead to a decrease in the gray matter density of the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and an increase in the density of the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with concentration and emotional regulation. The medieval monks didn't have fMRI scanners, but through centuries of inner exploration, they discovered a powerful technology for calming the mind. The wisdom is available to us now. You don't need to be religious to use it. The practice is simple. Find a quiet place to sit, close your eyes, and bring your attention to your breath. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently, without judgment, notice that it has wandered and bring your attention back to your breath. The breath is your anchor, just as the prayer was the monk's anchor. Doing this for just a few minutes each day can train your brain to be less reactive. You learn to create a space between a thought or a feeling and your reaction to it. You learn that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. This is a profound and liberating insight, and it is a direct path to reducing stress and anxiety. It's an ancient wisdom for our modern, noisy minds, but there is still so much we don't know. What is the precise neurological mechanism by which a mental anchor, like the breath or a mantra, calms the mind's chatter? Are some people genetically predisposed to be better at this kind of practice than others? And as these ancient contemplative techniques are stripped of their original spiritual context and turned into secular self-help tools, is something essential being lost in translation. Number 6, could you be wasting the wisdom of your elders? Our culture worships youth. We value innovation, disruption, and the new. We often see older people as out of touch, irrelevant, or a burden. We warehouse them in retirement communities, separated from the daily flow of life. We lose the benefit of their accumulated experience. This creates a disconnect between the generations, and it adds to our stress. We are trying to figure everything out on our own, from scratch, without a guide. In the Middle Ages and in most traditional societies, elders were revered. In a world without books or the internet, the oldest members of the community were the living libraries. They held the knowledge of history, of farming techniques, of herbal remedies, of how to navigate social conflicts. Their experience was seen as an invaluable resource. The Council of Elders was often the governing body of a village. Young people looked to them for guidance and wisdom. There was a natural and necessary transfer of knowledge from one generation to the next. This continuity provided a sense of stability and belonging. You were part of a long chain of human experience. You were not alone in facing the challenges of life. There were people who had been through it before who could offer you perspective. The stress of the unknown was mitigated by the wisdom of the known. We have broken this chain. We often dismiss the advice of our parents and grandparents, believing that the world has changed too much for their experience to be relevant. While it's true that they may not be able to help you with a coding problem, they can offer something much more valuable, wisdom about the timeless human challenges. How to deal with loss, how to sustain a long-term relationship, how to find meaning in work, how to face your own mortality. These are the things that don't change. The wisdom here is to actively seek out the company and counsel of older people. This could be your own grandparents, an older neighbor, or a mentor at work. Ask them questions, listen to their stories. Don't just listen for practical advice, but for perspective. Someone who has lived through 70 or 80 years has seen a lot of ups and downs. They have a long-term view that can be incredibly calming when you are caught up in the short-term drama of your own life. This also works in reverse. Studies on intergenerational programs where young people and older adults are brought together show benefits for both groups. The older adults feel a renewed sense of purpose and connection, while the young people gain mentors and a greater appreciation for the aging process. It helps to break down the age segregation that plagues our society. By rebuilding these bridges, we can reduce the stress of isolation for the old and the stress of inexperience for the young. But some questions are hard to answer. As life expectancy increases, what new social structures do we need to create to ensure that the wisdom of a growing elderly population is utilized, not wasted? Is our cultural obsession with youth a fear-based reaction to our denial of death? And what are we losing on a deep societal level by being the first culture in human history to systematically devalue the experience of its elders? Number 5, what if you took play seriously? Modern adulthood is often relentlessly serious. We have to be productive, efficient, and responsible. Play is seen as something for children, a frivolous waste of time. When we do have leisure time, we often engage in passive consumption, like watching TV, rather than active, joyful play. This lack of play contributes to our stress and burnout. A life without play is a grim and joyless one. The medieval world, for all its hardships, was also a world of play, celebration, and joyful absurdity. The calendar was filled with festivals, carnivals, and feast days. These were times when the normal rules were suspended. The Feast of Fools, for example, was a popular festival in the Middle Ages where a mock bishop or pope was elected, and church services were burlesqued. It was a day of sanctioned chaos and role reversal. There were games, sports, music, dancing, and theater. The paintings of Peter Bruegel the Elder, like his 1560 work, Children's Games, depict a world teeming with playful activity. This wasn't just mindless fun. Thinkers like the Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin, in his work on the Carnivalesque, argued that these festivals served a vital social function. They were a safety valve, a way to release pent-up social tensions. They temporarily dissolved hierarchies and reminded everyone of their shared humanity. They affirmed the importance of laughter, the body, and the joy of being alive, even in the midst of hardship. Gay play was a form of resilience. We need to bring this spirit back into our lives. The psychiatrist and author Dr. Stuart Brown, founder of the National Institute for Play, argues that play is not the opposite of work, it's the opposite of depression. His research has shown that play is as essential to our health as sleep or nutrition. Play can be anything that is done for its own sake, without a practical goal, and that is enjoyable and absorbing. It could be playing a sport, playing a board game, telling jokes with friends, dancing, or learning a new skill just for the fun of it. The wisdom here is to schedule play into your life with the same seriousness that you schedule your work meetings. See it as a non-negotiable part of your mental health routine. Give yourself permission to be silly, to be unproductive, to do something just because it's fun. Play is a powerful stress reliever. It activates our creativity, strengthens our social bonds, and reminds us that life is not just a series of problems to be solved. But we still have much to learn. What exactly happens in the brain when we are in a state of play, and how is it different from other states of focused attention? Why do so many adults feel a sense of guilt or shame about engaging in playful activities? And if we were to redesign our cities and workplaces to be more conducive to play, what would they look like, and how would it change our collective mental health? Number 4, could you learn more from a mistake than a success? We live in a culture that is terrified of failure. From a young age, we are taught that getting things wrong is bad. We are graded on our successes, not our efforts. In the workplace, mistakes can be career limiting. This creates a constant fear of not being good enough, a perfectionism that is a major driver of anxiety. We become so afraid of failing that we stop trying new things. The medieval system of apprenticeship offered a completely different model for learning. A young person would be sent to live and work with a master craftsman for a period of years, often 7 or more. They would start with the most menial tasks. A painter's apprentice might spend years just grinding pigments and preparing wooden panels. They were expected to make mistakes. Mistakes were not seen as failures, they were seen as the primary mechanism of learning. The master would correct the apprentice's mistake, the apprentice would learn, and they would try again. There was no shame in it. It was simply part of the slow, hands-on process of achieving mastery. This approach fosters what Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. In her influential 2006 book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, Dweck distinguishes between a fixed mindset, the belief that your abilities are innate and unchangeable, and a growth mindset, the belief that your abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. People with a fixed mindset fear failure because they see it as a judgment on their core abilities. People with a growth mindset welcome challenges and see failure as an opportunity to learn and improve. The entire medieval apprenticeship system was designed to cultivate a growth mindset. The wisdom for us is to reframe our relationship with failure. We need to start seeing our mistakes not as indictments of our character, but as valuable data. When you try something and it doesn't work, don't just feel bad about it. Get curious. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What will I do differently next time? This shifts you from a place of shame to a place of empowerment. You can create your own modern apprenticeship. When you want to learn a new skill, find a master, a mentor, a teacher, or even just a book or an online course. And then give yourself permission to be a beginner. Be willing to be bad at it for a while. Embrace the messy, mistake-ridden process of learning. This takes immense pressure off. The goal is not to be perfect immediately. The goal is to learn and grow slowly and steadily over time. This patient, compassionate approach to skill building is a powerful antidote to the stress of modern perfectionism. And yet, some fundamental questions remain. If the apprenticeship model is such a superior way to learn, why has our education system almost completely abandoned it in favor of abstract, classroom-based instruction? What is the neurological process by which our brains learn from errors, and can we create learning environments that optimize this process? And in a world of rapid technological change where skills can become obsolete quickly, how do we balance the slow, deep learning of an apprentice with the need for rapid adaptation? Number 3, what if nature was not a place to visit, but your home? For many of us, nature is a destination. It's a park we drive to on the weekend. It's a national park we visit on vacation. It's something separate from our daily lives, which are lived indoors, in cars, and in cities. This separation is a very recent development in human history, and it is a major source of our stress. We are animals who have put ourselves in a cage. For people in the Middle Ages, there was no separation between human life and the natural world. Most people lived agrarian lives, their existence completely intertwined with the seasons, the weather, the soil, and the animals. Nature was not always benign. It could be a source of famine, flood, and freezing cold, but it was their home. They understood its patterns and respected its power. Their folklore and religion were filled with the symbolism of nature. The forest was a place of both danger and magic. The changing of the seasons was a sacred drama. This constant, intimate connection to the natural world is something our bodies and minds still crave. The concept of ecopsychology explores the relationship between human mental health and the natural world. A wealth of research now supports the idea that spending time in nature is one of the most effective ways to reduce stress. A 2019 study published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology found that as little as 20 minutes spent in a natural setting was enough to significantly lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol. The Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, is based on this principle. Well, it's not about hiking or exercise. It's about simply being in the presence of trees and absorbing the environment through all your senses. The medieval peasant lived a life of constant forest bathing. We have to schedule it. The wisdom here is to reintegrate nature into your daily life, not just your holidays. This doesn't mean you have to move to the countryside. It can be as simple as bringing plants into your home or office. It can be eating your lunch in a city park instead of at your desk. It can be paying attention to the patch of sky you can see from your window. It's about cultivating an awareness of the natural world that is always around you, even in the middle of a city. Notice the birds, pay attention to the phase of the moon, learn the names of the trees on your street. This simple act of noticing helps to pull you out of your own head and its anxieties and reconnect you to a larger, slower, more ancient system. It reminds you that you are part of an ecosystem. This sense of belonging is a powerful antidote to the alienation and stress of modern urban life. But there's still so many unknowns. What are the specific mechanisms by which nature calms us? Is it the visual patterns of fractals in leaves and branches? Is it the airborne chemicals called phytoncides that trees release? Is it the quality of the light or the sounds of wind and water? As we continue to destroy the natural world at an unprecedented rate, are we also destroying a fundamental part of our own psychological support system? And could the global environmental crisis be, at its root, a symptom of a deep spiritual and psychological disconnect from our home? Number 2, could a simple ritual hold your day together? Our days are often chaotic and unpredictable. We are pulled in a dozen different directions at once. There is no clear structure, no sense of rhythm. This lack of a stable framework can be incredibly stressful. We feel unmoored, constantly reacting to the demands of the moment rather than living with intention. Life in a medieval monastery governed by the rule of Saint Benedict was the epitome of a structured, ritualized existence. The day was divided into a series of set activities: prayer, work, and study, all occurring at specific times. The ringing of a bell would signal the transition from one activity to the next. This strict schedule was not meant to be oppressive, it was designed to be liberating. By making the structure of the day automatic, it freed the monk's mind from the constant, draining task of deciding what to do next. It created a predictable, calming rhythm that held life together. Rituals are not just for monks. They are a fundamental human need. A ritual is a sequence of actions performed in a prescribed order. It can be sacred or secular. The key is that it is done consistently and with intention. Rituals provide a sense of stability, predictability, and meaning in a chaotic world. They are anchors in the storm of daily life. We have lost many of the shared rituals that used to structure our societies. But we can create our own personal rituals to reduce stress and bring a sense of order to our days. A morning ritual can be particularly powerful. Instead of grabbing your phone the moment you wake up, you could create a simple sequence: get up, drink a glass of water, do 5 minutes of stretching, and then sit in silence for a few minutes before starting your day. This simple ritual can set a calm, intentional tone for the hours that follow. An evening ritual can be just as important. It signals to your body and mind that it's time to wind down. This could be something like turning off all screens an hour before bed, drinking a cup of herbal tea, and reading a few pages of a book. The specific actions are less important than the consistency with which you perform them. These rituals become reliable islands of peace in your day. They are things you can control even when the rest of your life feels out of control. Research on the psychology of rituals has shown that they can reduce anxiety, increase confidence, and even improve performance. They work because they give us a sense of predictability and control, which are calming to an anxious brain. The medieval monk's life was one big ritual. Our lives don't need to be that rigid, but by thoughtfully incorporating a few simple, personal rituals into our daily routine, we can borrow their wisdom and create a more stable, peaceful, and meaningful existence. But the mystery of ritual remains. Why do our brains respond so powerfully to repetitive, symbolic actions, even when we know they have no direct practical effect? How does a simple ritual, like a pre-game routine for an athlete, actually translate into improved performance and reduced anxiety? And as our society becomes more secular and individualistic, what new shared rituals can we create to bind our communities together and mark the important transitions of life? Number 1, are you living in accordance with the seasons? Our modern, industrialized world runs on a single uniform schedule. The work week is Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, all year round. We expect the same level of energy and productivity from ourselves in the dark depths of January as we do in the long, bright days of June. We fight against the seasons with central heating, air conditioning, and electric lights that turn night into day. We live in a perpetual artificial summer. This constant, unvarying pace is unnatural, and it is a recipe for burnout. The medieval world moved to a different rhythm. It moved to the rhythm of the seasons. This was not a lifestyle choice. It was an agricultural necessity. Life in the summer was a period of intense, long-houred labor in the fields, from sunrise to sunset. It was a time of outward energy and activity. Winter, by contrast, was a time of rest and inwardness. The days were short, and there was less agricultural work to be done. It was a time for mending tools, for storytelling, for sleeping more, and for conserving energy. Spring was for planting and new beginnings. Autumn was for harvesting and preparing for the coming cold. Each season had its own distinct character, its own mood, and its own appropriate activities. For human life was in sync with the great cycles of nature. This provided a natural, yearly rhythm of stress and recovery. You didn't expect to be as productive in winter. It was understood to be a time for rest. This acceptance of seasonal energy flows is a profound piece of wisdom we have forgotten. We try to override our own biology. We are not machines, we are natural creatures, and we are still subject to the influence of the seasons, whether we admit it or not. The prevalence of seasonal affective disorder (SAD) is a clear indication of this. But even for those who don't have a clinical disorder, there is a natural tendency to have more energy in the summer and to feel more introspective and tired in the winter. By ignoring this and pushing ourselves to maintain the same pace all year, we create a chronic low-grade stress. We are fighting against our own nature. The wisdom here is to start living more seasonally. This doesn't mean you stop working in the winter, but it does mean adjusting your expectations and your activities. In the summer, embrace the long days. Be more social, take on bigger projects, and spend as much time outdoors as you can. In the winter, give yourself permission to slow down. Say no to some social invitations. Prioritize sleep and rest. Engage in quiet, indoor, restorative activities. Eat seasonally as well. Eat the cooling fruits and salads of summer and the warming root vegetables and stews of winter. By consciously aligning your life with the energy of the seasons, you can stop fighting a battle you can't win. You can learn to work with your natural rhythms instead of against them. This is perhaps the deepest and simplest piece of medieval wisdom. They lived inside the story of the year, we try to live outside of it. To find peace, we need to find our way back in. But the biggest questions are about our future. What is the full extent of the biological and psychological impact of living in a season-less, artificially lit world? Are our body's ancient seasonal clocks still running in the background, and what happens when their signals are constantly ignored? As climate change makes our seasons more extreme and unpredictable, will we be forced to rediscover a more adaptive seasonal way of living, whether we want to or not?